All right. Hey, everybody. All right. So today we're going to talk about the three types of fractions that you'll see when you're trying to change fractions into decimals. Now, this turns out to be really handy if you can recognize these three kinds. Now, I'm not talking about mixed numbers and improper fractions. I'm talking about when you want to change a fraction to a decimal, you got to keep your eye out for these three things, right? Okay, so here we go. The first one is what we call decimal fractions, right? They're the easiest kind to change to a decimal. The second kind, we call them decimal friendly because they're sort of easy to change into a decimal. And the last one we call decimal haters because these fractions really don't want to be a decimal. They're going to work against you. And they're the ones that we have to work the hardest at. All right, well, let's start with the easy one. Let's start with decimal fractions. Okay, now these are fractions that have a denominator that is a tenth or a hundredth or maybe even 1,000, right? Those are the decimal place values. And these are the easiest because when you read them, you automatically know what they are as a decimal. For example, 3/10 equals 3/10, right? That's the tenths place. So in the decimal system, we say the place value. So we say 3, and then we say the number, the place value, tenths. This one is 24 hundredths, so that's no whole numbers, right? You'll notice there's no whole number here out in front of the 24 hundredths. No whole number there. So that's 0. And the fraction part is 24 hundredths. So we say 24, and we say the last place value, 24 hundredths. So when you read the fraction, you're basically reading the decimal. You just need to learn how to write it differently. 6 hundredths, of course, again, there's no whole number, so it's 0. With a decimal, we always want to write the ones place. 0 and 6 hundredths. Now, this gets a little tricky because I know the tenths place is there and the hundredths place is there, so it should be 6 hundredths. So that means I'll put a 0 in there to hold the tenths place empty. Right? 0 and 6 hundredths, right here. 0 and 6 hundredths. And the last one, this is an improper fraction. And so that can trip you up. So here's the rule. You should, before doing anything like this, you should always simplify. Right? So I know that this would simplify to 1 and 8 tenths. Right? So again, it's still a decimal fraction. It still has a tenth as a denominator. So I'm just going to write it as 1 and in the tenth place I'm going to write 8. 1 and 8 tenths. Okay? So simplify first, right? That's always a rule when you're working with fractions. Simplify at any time you can. Always simplify. All right, so those are decimal fractions. Let's take a look at decimal friendly fractions. We call these decimal friendly because even though they don't have a decimal denominator, we can change them pretty easily. Right? So, for example, 1/2, right? I could make an equivalent fraction. I will just multiply this by 5/5, or it's like multiplying it by 1, and I'll get the equivalent fraction of 5/10. Voila, you've changed it to a decimal fraction. And then you can just easily write it 0 and 5/10. Same here, 3/20. Now, when the numbers get big, it's a little bit hard to deal with, but I will just have to remember, 20 can turn into 100, right? I will just multiply 20 times 5, and I would get 15 hundredths, right? And that would be written like this, 0.15, 15 hundredths. So keeping your eye out for these denominators that you can turn into a tenth or a hundredth. And sometimes, you just need to get used to them. And the more experience you have with multiplication, the easier it'll be. Fourth, turn into a tenth. But I know that 4/4, 4 times 25, would give me 100. And 1 times 25 gives me 2,500. Right? So I can write that as 0 and 25 hundredths. Running out of room there. Okay. And the last one is pretty tricky. 3/12, at first it doesn't look like it's decimal friendly. Like 12 doesn't seem to be able to become a tenth. It doesn't seem like it'll turn into a hundredth. But, like I said earlier, always simplify things before you start. Look what happens when we simplify this. I'm going to end up with 3 divided by 3 is 1, 12 divided by 3 is, 1/4. And we already recognized from up here that 1/4 is, right there, we know that 1/4 is 25 hundredths. So if you simplify a fraction, you might see that actually it is a decimal-friendly fraction. Okay, let's check out the last one. Decimal haters. Now these are things that just do not want to turn into fractions. I mean, they don't want to turn into decimals. They're just going to fight you, right? Things like 2/7 or 1/3. And with these, you're just going to go cowboy and horse on them, okay? It's the only way to go. Now, remember, you can go cowboy and horse on any fraction you want to. Just those others that are already decimal numbers, it's just easy to write them as decimals. The ones that are decimal friendly, it's just easier to change them to a decimal fraction. But the cowboy and horse will work with all of them. Now remember, we take the cowboy and we put them inside the house, and we take the horse outside the house, and we try and divide. So I can get 0 groups of 7 out of 2. I need another place value. After the ones place is the decimal, and I'll show my next place value. I'll extend my house out here to make room for my new place value. 7 goes into 22 times. Oh, I forgot to flush. There it is. There's my decimal. 2 times 7 is 14. I'm going to end up with 6 left over when I take the 2 groups of 7 out. I need another place value. That becomes 7. I can take 8 groups of 7 out of 60. And I have 40 left over. And I can take, let's see, 5 groups of 7 out of 40. And this can go on for a long time, right? But what we're going to do now is we're going to stop after thousands place. We'll stop right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to round it back. And we're going to say that that is really close to, I'll use white again, that's really close to 29 hundredths. And that'll be close enough for you to compare it to another fraction. Okay? We can always round back to the hundredths place in this class. So that's why we call them a hater, because it takes a little work to force that fraction to become a decimal number. All right, let's try the next one. I don't think it'll be quite so hard. Plus, we'll start to see a pattern we can use. Get my eraser, get a little bigger eraser here. Speed this up. All right, good enough. All right, let's try the other one. I'll put this. We'll put the cowboy in the house. We'll put the horse outside. I can't take a group of 3 out of 1, so I'm going to need another place value. I show my decimal, show another place value, and don't forget to flush. There it goes. I can get 3 groups of 3 out of 10. 3 times 3 is 9. Take that out, and I'm left with 1. I'll show my next place value. Oh, I have 10 again. Extend my house out a little bit, and I'll get 3 groups of 3 out of 10, and that's 9. Uh-oh. 1. I think this is just going to keep going on. Look, I got another 10. And this is what's called a repeating decimal. And so we're going to stop it right here at the hundredths place and put a line over it. And that shows that that decimal is going to go on and on and on. Okay? So there, we were able to convert these two fractions. Even though they didn't want to be, we were able to change them into decimals using the cowboy and the horse method. And you can use that on any fraction. It's just we don't really like to divide that much, so we can avoid it if we want. All right, here's the last special note. I'll say real quick. What if it's a mixed number? Well, remember that the whole number place in a fraction is the same as the whole number place in a decimal, right? 1 and 3/10 is written as 1 and 3/10. And if it's a decimal wannabe like this, we can just say, well, the whole number is 1, and then we can work on the fraction part. This is the fraction and the decimal parts are the same. We'll just change this into 10. That's 4/10. So 1 and 2/5 is the same as 1 and 4/10. You just need to work on changing the fraction part. In this, we just learned that 1/3 is that repeating decimal. So 1 and 1/3 is 1 and 3 repeating. Right? So keep the whole number in the ones place. It's the same. Okay? It's just the fraction that changes to the decimal numbers. All right. Good luck.